Greetings and a warm welcome from me, astrologer Patrick Arundell. Today, in the latest of my deep dive videos, I'm going to explore the astrology of October 2023. We have a big Libran emphasis at the start of the month, one that evolves more with the arrival of Mercury on the 5th. But as the month goes on, the sign of Scorpio really comes to life in the most animated of ways. But we also have a solar eclipse on the 14th, a new series in the sign of Libra, and that faces off with the axis of Aries. Then on the 28th, we have the final lunar eclipse in the series between Taurus and Scorpio. But right at the end of the month, some dramatic things to share with you, not least that Mercury and Mars come into an exact conjunction, but they're opposed by the bubbly energies of Jupiter. So much to share with you. If you are new to my channel, thank you so much for joining me. This is very much a community. If you have any thoughts, please do share them. I do try to interact with each one. If you're a returning visitor, thank you so much for joining us once more. If you've already subscribed, I really appreciate your support. If you've yet to do so, please click or tap on the bell notification symbol. Now, I'd just like to tell you about a very special opportunity. Year 2024 is racing towards us. If you'd like to get your personal forecast for next year now, based on your unique birth data, I will prepare for you the rest of year 2023 free of charge. Please see the link below for more, but with my 30% off special offer, you will also get your character analysis, your life roadmap report, which will help you to gain a much more intimate understanding of your situation, but also the life patterns that have been prevalent in your journey so far. I'd also like to say, if you want to check out your free year 2024 zodiac forecast, please see the link beneath this video. So October begins with the Sun and also Mars in the sign of Libra. Libra is all about relating, it's about balance, it's about listening, it can be about relating, and of course it can be about fairness. But the Sun in the sign of Libra is actually known to be in fall. It's exalted in the sign of Aries, so not the best position for the Sun. But also Mars, the planet that rules the sign of Aries, is actually in detriment in Libra. And it can struggle to be its usual hustle-bustle self, but actually Mars in Libra can be good for trying to set our boundaries when it comes to relationships. But as the month begins, Mars is actually forging a sparkling alliance with Venus, the ruler of Libra, which has come into the end of its journey, its long journey in Leo, which began on the 5th of June. We had the retrograde from the 23rd of July through to the 4th of September. But the angle with Mars, as this month begins, suggests we can relate with a great deal of passion, but also no little flirting with that Venus energy in Leo. So if there is someone that we're really drawn towards, that combination is very positive. But you know, Black Moon Lilith for the last 9 months has also been in Leo and moves on the 3rd of this month into the practical Virgo. Now, one of the things about Lilith here is it probably likes clean pressed sheets as much as actually crumpling them up in a passionate embrace. So it's just urging us all to be aware that a degree of organisation and good hygiene could be appreciated when it comes to intimacy in the 9 months to come. But on the 5th, Mercury, the planet of communication, which has been in a long slog through one of its 2 home signs of Virgo, and of course has gone through a 10-week pre-retrograde, retrograde, then post-retrograde period, emerges into the sunlight that is the sign of Libra. I really like the idea of Mercury in Libra. I think it helps to be a bit more detached. You can hear other people's viewpoints. Terrific for sharpening up those listening skills for sure. And we're going to need them this month because Mars then moves into a right angle with Pluto, the planet of power. Mars in the sign of Libra, obviously having to justify itself in some ways. So we could encounter someone in a position of authority or power who's not too fussed about our desire for fairness, equilibrium, the give and take. They want to have control and they want to dominate. Or it's also important to understand our own attitudes towards relationships as well. But any politics that are going on in any type of close bond, but particularly if there's any kind of possessiveness or jealousy or control, that's going to be highlighted. And Mars in Libra can push back at Pluto, but Pluto's resisting because at this stage of the month it's still in retrograde, but in the sign of Capricorn it wants to keep that old traditional authority, whereas Mars in Libra is really wanting the new, more inclusive way of approaching things. But on the 9th, Venus does replace Mercury in the sign of Virgo. Venus in Virgo in its fall. Interesting, isn't it? But it's also immediately blocked by Saturn. Because Venus in Virgo can be a bit pernickety, very keen to please other people, but in tangible ways. You might get a really nice cup of tea with a Virgo Venus, not necessarily so much the passionate embrace, but Saturn can cool things down a lot. So that Mars square with Pluto, if there are politics, I feel that it could come down to some small details. And if things have felt brittle with Mercury going through the sign of Virgo, and maybe some things that to us may seem irrelevant, to someone else may have seemed massive. Because one of the things with Virgo energy is there can be a tendency to focus in on something very precisely and miss the big picture. So if there is something that someone's been unhappy about, it could get expressed, but particularly on the 10th when the opposition becomes exact. But on the 11th, Pluto ends its retrograde, which began on the 1st of May. If you remember, that was in Aquarius. It reversed back into Capricorn on the 11th of June. But on the 12th of this month, Mars, ironically, the ruler of Scorpio, which like Pluto, the co-ruler, the co-regent, that enters the sign of Scorpio. So the modern ruler goes direct on the 11th, the traditional ruler enters Scorpio on the 12th. Now Mars here is very, very passionate, and of course it's very in tune with the concept of desire. But because the two rulers of Scorpio have been in mortal conflict through the 3rd to the 12th of this month, maybe the dust is still settling from some kind of dispute or outright conflict. But Mars moving into Scorpio is really wanting us to get in touch with what we really yearn for. Now, in a purely relationship sense, that could be intimacy, but it can also be meaningfulness, because Scorpio is not a lightweight sign. It wants to have a real connection, and that can be emotional, it can be physical, but it also can give us a lot of impetus to improve our financial lot, but especially to do with long-term finances, anything to do with legacies, wills, pensions, investments, savings. If you're an entrepreneurial person, Mars moving into this area is definitely a good portent. But on the 14th, we have that sparkling solar eclipse, the first in a series in the sign of Libra. It's going to be reflected by the Libran lunar eclipse, challenged on the 28th of March next year, but then mirrored exactly by the Aries solar eclipse on the 8th of April. But of course the sign of Libra is about relating. It is about trying to get that midpoint between what we want for ourselves and feeling it works for the people we're interacting with. But also, of course, it's a cardinal sign. So Libra is a very, very potent sign of action, but maybe around social justice, this is going to activate a lot of debates about how we interact with one another, and this is going to go on for the next year and a half. Why not just the next 6 months, the length of the eclipse? Well, it's simply that there's another solar eclipse in the sign of Libra next year on the 4th of October. That one's going to be conjunct Mercury. But this one is in a quincunx with Uranus. Uranus in house 2 is about resources, our self-worth, but of course is a very restless influence, can be quite radical. We've seen a lot of industrial action where people feel that they're not being recognised and not being respected for their worth. It's not always about the money. So in relationships, if we feel that someone is taking us for granted, and however much we reach into their situation, they're not reaching into ours or recognising our commitment, whether it's in terms of that acknowledgement in a personal sense or a fair reward for our labour, that could still continue to be an issue in the following 6 months, but also over the next year and a half. Now from the 19th to the 21st, it's Mercury's time to get into a rat-a-tat with Pluto. But on the 20th, we have a superior conjunction, a cazimi between the Sun and Mercury. Because Mercury's direct at this stage, it's the other side of the Sun as we see it from planet Earth. But what the Sun does is amplify the benefits of Mercury. So our skills as relators, being able to hear other people's stories, not necessarily always wanting to put how we feel forwards, being good at interaction with others. The sign of Libra can be very gracious, very graceful. It can be superficial, but I think that Mercury connecting with the Sun in this way gives us an opportunity to gain insights to our relationships, but particularly where we feel the power is not really working, the power dynamic, and that's coming because Pluto is squaring up this event. Now, Mercury's going to say au revoir to Libra on the 22nd and moves into the analytical position it enjoys in Scorpio. Here, Mercury's not bothered with what people are saying, the dialogue. It's much more concerned with what they're meaning. So it's about comprehension. It's about reading the subtext. It's terrific for diving deep into subjects, whether they're mystical or whether it's to do with life and death, whether it's to do with murder mystery stories. What we want to do with Mercury in Scorpio is investigate. And we need some drama and transformation within the investigation. But the Sun immediately follows Mercury moving into Scorpio in clashing with Pluto. You can see what a Scorpionic month it's going to be, despite the Libran solar eclipse. So what to make of that? Well, the Sun in Libra is trying to have its voice heard. And it could be because Pluto's in the sign of the orthodox, the established authority, the way people have been used to maintaining a degree of control, perhaps some people would say, over all of us. Big government, big institutions, big business. There is an assumed control within that as citizens we may be speaking out to and against. So speaking the truth to power, entirely possible. But then the Sun joins up with Mars and Mercury in Scorpio. But as it does, it goes into a trine with Saturn in the sign of Pisces. So we have a water triplicity. That's really good because Pisces is the sign of culmination. We know that Saturn's not great in Pisces, but it's asking us to embrace the psychological dimension, Scorpio, and transformation, Scorpio, with our need for security, peace, tranquility, stability, and good nurturing relationships, which is what Saturn's encouraging us to learn in its journey through Pisces over the next couple of years. But then we have Mercury and Mars coming together slowly but surely and going into an opposition with Jupiter. This is really fascinating because Mercury and Mars is quite a strident combination, particularly in Scorpio. Scorpio energy can be surprisingly direct. Scorpios have a reputation for being reserved, but they're only reserved about the things that they want to be reserved about. When it comes to the observations on other people's behaviour, Scorpios can be incredibly direct. don't be surprised if someone truth bombs you or me at this part of the month, and they may do it in a very bold way. But also because Jupiter is facing them on the other side of the heavens, we're getting to a pivot point in terms of the economic situation that we've all been enduring. And because the lunar eclipse, which occurs on the 28th, is really cresting around this opposition between Jupiter, Mercury and Mars, it's going to be interesting to see how we go into the last quarter of this year and the first quarter of 2024, because of course it was when we started to have the eclipse series in Taurus and Scorpio in the spring of 2022, the autumn of 22, with the Taurus eclipse on the 8th of November, which obviously was opposite Uranus but squared up with Saturn. And since then, really, we've been on the back foot in terms of increased costs, mortgage rates, interest rates, raw commodities and so forth. And it's been a real big shift for everyone, not obviously helped by some of the global things that are going on in terms of wars and so forth. But what we get is the last eclipse series with this Taurus lunar eclipse, and I think it's going to be interesting whether the passion of Mercury and Mars in Scorpio, which is about handling money wisely. You know, a lot of people who are bankers, insurance brokers, even undertakers are Scorpions, because they understand the outcome, the journey, the transition. And of course, Pluto is the sign of life and death, essentially about reincarnation. So this month, we are going to see some relationships tested to absolute destruction, and some may not make it. But I feel the Scorpio energy that comes in towards the end of the month is bringing some deep and massive transformations for us all collectively. And it's not necessarily going to be smooth and without pain, because always with Pluto, we do have to give up something to gain something. So the evolution that it brings, and all these Scorpio energies, and the thrust and desire of Mars, and what Mars wants it now, particularly in that very urgent conjunction with Mercury, and with Jupiter amping up and egging on Mars and Mercury. Jupiter, though it's pretty solid and wise in the sign of Taurus, it is saying, look, what can we extract from this situation that makes things better? So the stars are looking a little bit more positive, but of course there has been so much quantitative easing since 2008 that has affected the bond market. So a lot of governments have a lot of debt because of COVID, and of course the economic situation in China, which, you know, is important whether we like it or not. They've got a huge housing crisis there, a sort of subprime problem, rather similar to what we had in 2008. So a lot of property companies there have not made it, and that's had a huge impact because we're also connected collectively, and also what's happening in Ukraine as well. So I feel if there is some good news data that springs up at the end of this month, it could provide some reassurance and bounce back. But we're still in a tenuous stage. But I feel that what we can say is very, very profound changes are unfolding for sure. And obviously automation, artificial intelligence, robotics is all part of the story of this big shake-up that we're all going through, which in itself is hugely Plutonian. Now, to check out your free in-depth zodiac forecast from Aries through to Pisces for October, please see the link below, but you can also check out your year 2024 forecast too. For now, thank you so much for joining me. It's been a real pleasure being with you. Take care, stay safe, and goodbye for now.